Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Prepper Talk Radio. This is your destination for the realization that our world is fragile, and our message, our goal is to help you become anti-fragile. Tonight, we're going to do another fun how-to, and it is brought to you by our good friends over at AMP3. They're giving you 15% off for your first aid kits. Now, when it comes to survival, you want really good kits from really good people. These are emergency kits built with you in mind, built with, hey, I can't get to the hospital today. Hey, I need to know exactly what to do. And they were designed by a Navy medic who also became an emergency room doctor, 30 plus years in the emergency room. So fantastic people, David Pruitt. Check out amp-3.net and you will get 15% off, 15 if you use the code PrepperTalk. And since we're talking power outages today, we want to make sure you guys head on over now before a power outage goes out to our friends at Survival Frog. And if you use PrepperTalk 10, you'll get 10% off and they even have Goal Zero backup batteries, panels, little portable ones for your backpack and big old ones for your house. So check them out, survivalfrog.com, and use PrepperTalk 10 to save 10%. Welcome
yes,
to the show, guys.
that code did change. That code did change. It went from Prepper Talk to Prepper Talk 10. So just remember that when you go to Survival Frog.
Yes. Amen.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited. This is a fun topic. I did some digging. I did some phone calls, lots and lots of phone calls, as I think everyone should. When you're thinking about power outages, we want to take two different approaches. Short-term stuff and long-term stuff, and I guess three different approaches, and more independence, right? Energy independence is part of the perspective for today. So what happens if you have a power outage? What do you lose first? What do you guys think about when you think power outage?
I think about being a kid again, right? This is fun. Oh, power's out. Don't have to go to school. I get to put the tent up. I get to use the flashlight, go around the house, as if, I don't know, just fun. That's what I initially think about, right? When power goes out, right? I'm like, woohoo.
Well, we're blessed too, because we live in an area where there's not a whole lot of power outages.
Yeah.
I talk to guys in Texas all the time and they're like, yeah, our lights are flickering as we speak. And I'm like, what? Their grid is just old and not well kept, and just there's so many people on it. It's just depending on where you live in the United States, you've got different issues. Like I grew up in Colorado, and I had power outages all the time, but they were short. Oh, this one's 3 hours. Oh, this one's 5 hours. Oh, this one's 25 minutes. It's short. But I always thought about when I think of power outages, I always think about, oh, are we going to break out our headlamps and flashlights, or are we going to break out candles? Is this long term? Is this short term? Like what's the reality of this scenario, if you will?
We had a power outage here in Utah County not too long ago, and I was pretty excited because I wanted to try out some of my gear, and I was like, okay, it was around dinner time. I was like, no big deal. They said it'd be out, a couple hours, whatever. And then I realized I was like, shoot, cool. I can, I'm going to grab the microwave. I'll plug it into my power bank and I'll be able to warm up my food. Nothing will change for me. Other than the fact that I learned that my microwave was built into the darn cabinetry and I couldn't get to the power cord. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe part of my gear should be having an extra microwave now so that I can use that for loading up my, warming up my food when it comes time. So there's one of the things that I like about, whether they're planned or whether they're a legit emergency. But one of the things that I like about having situations like that is you get to kind of test you get to test your gear, test your know-how, your go for it. And I realized that I don't like having no power. It's like you get accustomed to the conveniences of day-to-day life. And of course, a couple hours is an inconvenience. Once it gets to a couple of days or maybe even weeks, you're like, you know what, let's just surrender to the new lifestyle and you move into it. But, I just realized, you kind of realize how much you really count on power for everything. You go to this and check that and like, wait a minute, it doesn't work. Oh yeah, the power's out. And so it's just kind of interesting how you really realize when you don't have it anymore, you realize just how much you use it.
Right. The power's off. You still walk into a room. You still try and flip the light on. Like, oh yeah, the power's off.
Yeah, right.
And it is, like you say, it's kind of a forced practice, especially for the rest of the family. You know, I'm always willing. Let's turn the power off to the house. And let's practice being without power. That's not real feasible. We all have to work. Kids have to go to school and so forth. But to have that kind of practice to where it's kind of forced on you is, in my opinion, like you said, I kind of look forward to it. And so it's a bit of a essentially forced practice for an emergency, which, maybe the rest of the family is just not willing to do. If I were to go outside and flip the breaker off, I'd get so many complaints. We're practicing. No, we're not doing that right. You know what I mean? Anyway, so that's what I look forward to in a power outage, and mainly because I'm prepared. Right, I'm not concerned. I know what to do. We got the generator. We've got things that will that will take care of the essentials. And my take on a power outage is, and the way I like to prepare, I prefer to prepare, is just becoming less dependent on the grid, more independent of the grid, and being consciously lowering my power consumption on a daily basis, or weekly, or monthly, or yearly, whatever. Which is obviously very difficult to do because I've got a monitor here, I got a computer here, I've got and when I always want to cut back, to get rid of things, simplify my life, but things always tend to get bigger TVs, bigger, more powerful modem. Everything requires more and more electricity, and obviously that's what's being foisted on us as well with electric cars. And not to go on a tangent, but I think it's just that conscious effort, that conscious day-to-day of how reliant you really are on electricity, and what I can do to minimize that.
Well, our use of electricity, our use of utilities, the largest thing or draw is our heating and cooling, right? That's why in the summer it's ridiculous how much you're spending on electricity, because you're running your AC, if you've got one, right, all day long. And if your utilities are through the roof during winter, it's because you're running your heating all day long, whether it's gas or electric, whatever. You're still spending less energy typically in the winter than you are in the summer. And then they charge more during the summer for electricity than they do in the winter. So there's like summer rates and winter rates. It's like, oh yay, we're saving money now. We're hitting October. It's going to cost less for utilities, and we're going to use less, and it's going to be great. And then your gas price goes up, right? And so when I think of power outages and I think of like long-term solutions, like, yeah, using less would be ideal. But I think you're right. It's harder and harder to use less. And then with working in the solar industry, I see all the different power companies going to solar alternatives, going to wind alternatives, and it's like the cost to get those utilities to where they need to be used is huge. Like, for example, Utah is buying, their new initiative is Rocky Mountain Power is buying a ton of electricity, or will be, from this huge electrical solar panel installation that's going to go down in Navajo Nation, which is mostly Four Corners area. Well, then they got to pipe all that electric here, so to speak. I know pipe isn't the right word, but they got to increase the amperage to get more flow up to this area. And that's expensive, right? So the dependence on that system, they're spending all this money expanding, getting all these other different resources and utilities so that they can keep providing you electricity. And the less you need doesn't matter, because they're still going to up their rates every year. It's like, how much did it cost you to buy a gallon of gas when you were learning to drive? It was less than $1. Mm-hmm. That's for those of us on video. Those of you listening, you may have been at 25 cents, or you may be at $2 to $3, depending, right? But it doesn't get cheaper in the economy that we live in.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
and I was going to say, and obviously the things that come to mind that we can do, that I can do around my house, is make my house more energy efficient. right? That's kind of what I was saying. And, and that does include maybe not buying the big screen TV, living with a smaller TV, watching, less TV and just doing, less of that, less time on computers and so forth. But also, pretty much every light nowadays is an LED bulb, right? And which are very energy efficient, right? So much more efficient than the incandescents or the fluorescents. You can't really even find the incandescents anymore. I do realize that LEDs are bad for your eyes. Incandescents are so much better, but they produce heat. They use a lot more energy and so forth. So if you're still using incandescents or fluorescents, have some LEDs standing by. So if the power goes out, and you have a backup system, say generator or whatever, that you're using LEDs, that you have those backup lights for a particular room or a lamp or flashlights or whatever kind of lighting. There's so many different types of lighting. We've got some on our website that we like and so forth, but a lot of different options that way. And lighting is obviously critical at night, or it's important. It's not necessarily critical, right? Like you're saying, Scott, the critical is the heating, cooling, refrigeration, and then cooking, right? And so my focus is toward diversifying into different ways to heat, to cook, to refrigerate. And that's a hard one there, right? But or just doing without. And obviously in summer, when the power goes out and it's hot, man, that sucks. In the winter, when the power goes out and it's cold, man, that sucks. So how do you remedy that? How do you prepare for that?
Especially if you don't have a fireplace in your house. A lot of people they don't build houses with fireplaces every house like they used to. And so if you don't have a fireplace and it hits the winter, especially if you're in a snow area, you're up a creek if you don't have some kind of wood stove or some way to heat the home. And so I totally agree. Another thing that I think about is that, ever since the light bulb was invented, people started staying up later. And there's a Bible verse that talks about, early to bed, early to rise makes a man wealthy, wise, and healthy and wise.
Wealthy and wise.
And, when the power goes out, to me, I'm just like, you know what, maybe I'll go to bed when it actually gets dark, and maybe I'll rise when it actually gets light, and maybe I'll have healthier, wealthier, and wiser. We were chatting, they were teasing me earlier today because I love stoicism, and I just had a little bit of a rough day today. And Scott was like, "Hey, Paris, I thought you were trying to be a stoic." I'm like, well, you know what, maybe I need to get to bed earlier and rise a little earlier so I'm a little wiser and stoicer,
Maybe we all just need to go off grid so we can actually get there.
Well, I think that would give us, the opportunity to do some things that we want to do that we are otherwise distracted from, like reading, for example. I don't read as much as I want to do because I'm distracted by so many other things. But to have a simple headlamp, or a candle, or something very low light, you don't need much to read by, to sit down, like you say, read something from the Stoics, or your scriptures or whatever, and have that quiet time. Because obviously when the power's out, it's going to be more quiet, less distractions. So take that opportunity and enjoy it, right?
Well, I like what you said earlier, Shane, about how we should look for ways to alternatively heat or alternatively, cool our homes. And, I feel like, there's so many of the, like you've used this so many times, look to the past and prepare for the future. And so what did they do before electricity? What did they do before houses were wired and light bulbs were around? Because we lived for thousands of years without, or hundreds of years anyways, without technology like that. I'm sure thousands. And so what did they do? And can we do that in our day, or at least learn how to do it so that when it hits, we know what to do? And I think, it's great to have a generator. I have a dual power generator from Costco that I have prepared for lighting. And that's a big thing too, honestly, because if you think about all the different emergencies that are going to happen, earthquake, flooding, windstorms, hurricanes, all of those things can potentially produce a power outage. Like every natural disaster, the power usually goes out in every single one of them. So that's a pretty standard thing to prepare for, and having no power. So that's when you guys kept teasing me about, are you finally going to get a generator, Paris? I'm like, you know what? I do. I need to get one.
Now you've doubled up on it.
Now I've got one that's a gas, and it's propane and gasoline. And I have another one that's a power bank, and I'm grateful that I have them now for sure.
On our last week, we interviewed Sarah Thrush, and one thing that she is preparing for is a power outage. She says,
Yeah.
she said she has 2 great big freezers because she does a lot of canning, and she has a couple hundred backup mason jars that when the power goes out, she's going to be busy putting that stuff from her freezer into mason jars. And like you say, in Paris, look to the past to prepare for the future. 100 plus years ago, we didn't really have refrigeration. For refrigeration wasn't anything like what we have nowadays. And they preserve things in jars and bottles and cans and so forth. And so that's one way which I hadn't thought about before. In that, what would I do with my freezer? What would I do with my fridge if we had an extended downtime or the power outage? Okay, pull out the bottles and start canning stuff. Right,
Yeah.
start preserving some of that food in your fridge and freezer, so that it just doesn't go to waste, or you don't feel like you have to hurry and eat it all or share it. Right,
I mean, it was cool to
Prepare
learn
for
that you
long
can do
term.
that. You can can meat. Like I was like, wait,
Yeah.
what? That's cool,
Yeah, you sure can.
So
Yeah.
I'm.
But
it
you
was
have
fun
to be
learn.
prepared. You have to have you have to have the equipment, the
100%.
pressure canner, if I can speak, hot water canner, hot bath canner, or my mom always used a steam canner, and be prepared to do that. So it's not like, oh, I got to run to the store and buy a canner. Well, good luck with
Wait,
that.
You've got to have the stuff, but you also have to know how to use it. It goes
Yep.
back to knowledge and skill can outperform any gear you have.
Mhm.
We talk about that in our book, Ready Radius. If you want a copy, go to Prepper Talk Radio. We got free shipping going on right now. But yeah, you've got to be planned out. You've got to have a plan. As we have in our Facebook group, Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance, we have a quote. Right when you log in, you go in there. What is the quote at the top of the page?
If you fail to plan, you're planned to fail.
Exactly. Good old Benjamin Franklin. That, I think, we talk about it a lot. And so it's kind of regurgitated and recycled, but it's like, you have to have a plan. You have to have at least an idea of what you're going to do. If you can, please write it out, practice it out with the family, review it, change it as needed, right? Then you're going to be a lot better off than people who don't have a plan. Like simple little things you can do. Have your food preservation stuff ready so that if things go sideways and power goes out for more than 2 hours, you have a plan of what you're going to try to preserve right away, right? Preserve the meats, the things that are going to spoil the fastest. Preserve those things first. Other things to think of. Okay, do I have to have light? No, but next time you're buying lights, you might as well buy some of those battery lights, right? They look like a regular LED. You screw them into the socket just like a regular light.
Mm-hmm.
But when the power goes out, it senses that, and it's stored up enough energy in there that you can still use the lights for a while, right?
I think
and they have
another.
different ones you can use for different amounts of time.
Speaking of lights, Scott, I think that let's just talk about our good friends over at Devos Outdoor. That light is excellent. It's a battery powered light. It's solar. You can solar charge it, and you can put it on a pole, and you can put that thing up to the ceiling, and you click it on, and you got the whole room lit up. And I think that's an excellent way to light up the room when you need it. And if you go to Devos Outdoor, DEVOS Outdoor.com, and we changed our code with them too. We actually got Prepper Talk instead of the old one. So if you go to devosoutdoor.com and use code Prepper Talk, you get 10% off those lights, and those are worth it. And if you're in a power outage and you want to have lights, because you can charge those things all day long, get them up and on a solar panel, because it comes with a solar panel if you get it, and charge those things up all day long. And then at night you have several hours of time. And frankly, what's cool too is they just upgraded quite a bit their power, but they have a motion sensor. So
cool.
One of the things that makes those lights now even more efficient is that if you leave the room, it'll shut off and preserve the power. And then when you walk into the room, it can sense that somebody's walked in and turn back on for you. So I think that's a great, another great resource for people who want to have light in a kind of hands-off light, without having to carry a flashlight everywhere you go.
And don't get me wrong, I love candles. We all love candles, birthday candles, right? But there's a flame hazard, especially if you've got children. You want to eliminate hazards as much as possible. I do see a future where we may be reliant on candles.
Mm-hmm.
So before then, we have to look and learn how to make candles, right?
Mhm.
It's not that hard, but it is time consuming.
And you
But
need the
the other thing
supplies.
is right, light is just a small part of the equation.
Yeah, very
The
small.
bigger one is the heating and the cooling and the medical needs, right?
Oh,
I need
medical
power
needs.
for my CPAP. Some of you have medical conditions far worse than that, and you need power for those, right? But you need
Oxygen.
Mhm.
oxygen, right? You need power for those things. But then when it comes to heating and cooling, right? Figure out the plan for those first, medical first, then heating and cooling. Dude, have you guys ever seen these Persian cooling towers?
No.
You heard of these?
I'm gonna have to look it up.
They call them wind catchers. But
Wind
they're these
catchers?
tall towers. The wind would come in
No,
and
I
then
have
it
seen
would
these.
shoot down the tower. And they sometimes would use irrigation, sometimes not, to cool it even further. So the benefits of water.
Larger. It's like a misting system, right? But over a
No.
larger area. Is that right?
Basically the water would or the air would come down and it would cool. And as it would cool, it would actually hypercool the further it goes down, and then it would shoot through the tunnels underneath the city and cool the major buildings.
Okay, I see.
And sometimes they would put it through where the water would go through the same area, which would even hypercool it even more, because the thermal mass of water is fantastic for cooling.
That's interesting.
But they would use that. I mean, and the idea of it, some of the origins say it came from Iran. Nobody really knows for sure, but it's been used for forever. I don't even know how long.
So
But
it's kind
all
of
over the place in the Middle East,
so
and
it's
it's
kind of
fantastic.
the reason why there are cupolas on older homes, where they were actually functional. Whereas now you see something that's usually just for decorative purposes. But that makes sense. You've got a point that's higher that catches the wind, that funnels it down, and then if you can get it underground to funnel it to other locations, that's pretty cool, especially in those types of arid climates. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, getting underground, like a basement. We have a basement. Love the basement in the summer, right? And in the winter, it's cold, but it's not as cold as if it were unheated, right? So it retains the heat in the winter and the cool in the summer. So thermal mass, having a basement, being underground.
So other than having a cave to live in,
I would love to have a cave. Not a bunker, but yeah. No, that's just very
there's so many benefits. Like everywhere you live in the world, there's a benefit to the climate that you're in. There's also drawbacks, but you've got to plan accordingly. Like we live in the Rockies, so we've got to think about where we are. We're in a desert climate, but also we have horrible winters. And so we've got to think about those things. You might be in an area like Florida where you get some pretty cold days, but it's not 6 months long.
50 degrees.
Right. And so you can bundle up and be okay. But then you have those hot, humid days where you're just like, it's dang near impossible to live and function.
Yeah, that's another thing to think about. That like I think of Las Vegas or Arizona, Phoenix, and so forth, where they're having these extremely hot days. And how would they live without electricity?
Yeah.
I have family friends down there that they have a pool, and they say sometimes it's just too hot to even go out in the pool. Like
Dang.
that is.
That's
so
hot.
My advice is move. If that's the concern, if you really want to be prepared, you either have to be completely prepared for power outage, which I don't know how you would do that with other underground tunnels and air conditioning and so forth in those areas, or get to a better place, but get to a better location.
So when I lived down there, we used a lot of different things to try to keep cool. I had power go out in one of my places for 2 days, and it was late August, early September.
Horrible.
They were doing some development and power went out, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. And so I had a air mister in the backyard that I could just run the water, and I could sit on the back patio, and it was actually cooler on the back patio than it was in my house because I had a mister. Right? It didn't require electricity. I just ran it off the hose. The other thing is I learned this when I was in the South. I started a mission in Florida, and one of the things they used to do to keep the large homes cool they would actually take and wet not the curtains, but they had another type of curtain that they'd put in during the summers. They'd wet those and use those as evaporative coolers. Open all the windows, wet every one of those, and just let the cool breeze blow through. The warm breeze blow through it, and that would cool the main floor of the home. So there are ways to cool, but warming, most of the time we're going to go back to a fireplace, go back to a fire source. right? Unless we have another way to warm. I've got propane, I've got those little buddy heaters, but then you also have to think about, same with a fire, carbon monoxide.
Mm-hmm.
Got to be cognizant of that. Make sure I've got ventilation, make sure I've got fresh air coming in, because without power and proper circulation, that can suffocate and kill you.
Well, I would dare bet, 100 years ago, pretty much every house had a fireplace or a wood stove or something like that. Coal, something where you could actually bring in a fuel that is more readily available than trying to pipe in your own natural gas or propane, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can have coal delivered or wood delivered or whatever. And the trend has been that I've seen, tear those suckers out and put in a gas fireplace, right? Because it's cleaner, it's less drafty. You just flick a switch and you got instant heat. And to a certain point, yes, I think, that our house does not have a wood stove. That is in one of my long-term plans. We do have a gas stove, which I plan on retrofitting to a wood stove, which my wife is fighting against me because everybody loves those gas fireplaces. You just flick the switch, but it will still work when the power's out. And so that is our backup currently, our backup heat source. And that will, obviously the circulating fan obviously won't work on that. So we have other circulating fans that we can plug into our power banks to circulate that warm air through the house. And obviously we only have to keep it above freezing, to keep the pipes from freezing. That's the biggest thing.
How long will the gas keep running though in a power outage?
That is always the question. Yep.
Pipes are all electrically pressurized, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And you have the electric ignition to light the thing.
Mm-hmm.
The pilot light, usually is electric ignition.
Well, the pilot light is always running. On ours anyway, and I think on most gas fireplaces, it's always on. And so the ignition is completing a circuit. So it isn't necessary on ours in particular. It's completing a circuit. So it's not necessarily need the grid power other than to run the circulation fan, right? Mm-hmm. Which, you lose most of it out of that the vent anyway. So, but we do have the provision with our power bank to actually wire our furnace into a power bank so we could get that running as long as the natural gas is flowing. That's one option we're doing. And then also the gas fireplace where we could, I could unwire that electrical switch and wire that into our power bank and have a fan to blow the heat through the house. So I've made for those provisions for those two ways to heat the house. And it's not the simplest thing. I don't just have to flip a switch. I've got to do some wiring, but I've already figured that out and prepared to do that. So that's our backup plan. And then worst case, I do have a wood stove stashed in my storage, one of my storage sheds that I would have to figure out how to get it into the basement and get the piping out one of the windows so I could have a fire in the house.
Nice.
Awesome.
I have a buddy heater, and those are remarkably well put together. I used one for a camping trip in a tent, and I was like, oh my gosh, if I fall asleep, is this thing going to burn the tent down? And it didn't. So I guess I took a chance. And it worked. The other thing that's cool is that I think I used it one time when my daughter and I went camping, and our church has a daddy-daughter camp out, but we went, and I think she got knocked over, and it immediately turned off. So those are really well put together. I wouldn't, don't necessarily put your life on it, but at the same time, I think you can trust those things.
Yeah.
And then
they do make larger versions of it as well.
Yeah, there are different I got a couple of them. Costco has deals on those every once in a while, especially as you head into winter. Usually they'll have a deal, and I got a couple of them. And so I think it's worth it to have one for, a couple different rooms. If you have a power outage and it's in the wintertime, one of the things that I would recommend is, consolidate your household into one or two rooms. Don't be using so much of the house. I've got a pretty large house now that I moved to Utah, and I think I would probably stay either upstairs or downstairs, pick one, and then we can just consolidate to that area so that we're not using more energy than we need to, especially in a long-term power outage. I kind of want to reiterate a little bit more about that medical issues. When we had a power outage a couple weeks, months ago in here, there was a Facebook group people were on their phones, talking in the Facebook group. And there was a lot of people that were saying, my oxygen machine, I didn't get enough backup oxygen, and my oxygen machine runs on. I hope it comes on in the next 2 hours because that's all the extra backup I have. And so to me, I'm like, go get more backups, like get 4 or 5 canisters, have more than 1 or 2 hours worth of oxygen machines, or get some kind of power bank that will give you the ability to keep that thing going. I mean, really plan well. Like a lot of people who don't have a lot of money, they just don't have a lot of money. But at the same time, that's a priority to me. Like if your health is that serious that you've got to have machines to help you, then you need to have a way to keep those things running when the power goes out.
Amen. Well, and also it's like you have to consider, what is your living condition? Like, am I in an apartment? Am I in a condo? Am I on a second story, a third story, a 20th story? Like, what am I going to have access to? And what am I not going to have access to during a power outage? Depending on where you live, will the water continue to run? Will the water turn off because it's electrically pressurized? Will the sewer continue to run, or will it get cut off? Like, these are questions you should be asking yourself. We can't answer them for you because every city, every district, every county, it's set up differently all over the United States. There's similar systems, but they're set up differently. Like before the show, we were talking, Shane has a water tower where he is.
Water tank. Yeah. Just up.
Water
from
tank,
us.
up high.
But the water
Where
is
I
pumped
live,
there, right? It is pumped there after it comes out of the water treatment. It gets pumped up to there. So we have a limited amount of time for when the power goes out. If it's on that wide of a basis, I'm sure they have a backup generator to where, we run out of water.
And where I live, we have multiple small reservoir tanks they're not tanks, but they're just small reservoirs. So we've got 4 reservoirs. We've got a holding tank above those that's for one of the water sources, but then everything else is gravity fed from a huge reservoir up north through the Weber River. Like it all gets down here eventually, but it's all gravity fed. And I was like unsure how it all worked. So I called my public works today and was asking all these questions. The guy's like, wow, that's really interesting. No one's ever asked me all this at once. Like I've had different questions before, but not in this kind of rapid fire. Like, okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? How long will the power last? Okay, where are your battery banks? Do you have generators? How long will the generators last? And they're like, and he gave me an example of what happened in 2012. We had this huge windstorm that knocked out the power for 3 days in most areas in the city. And the water was fine because it was all gravity fed from larger solutions farther and farther away. And the backup batteries or backup generators running the other pressure sections didn't fail. Like everything was fine. But the question is okay, well, how long could it last indefinitely in a long-term situation? And he's like, honestly, it would depend on usage, how many people were still using the systems.
Interesting.
And so that's the other question. Okay, can I outlast everyone else needing all the water? That's a morbid thought, right? In the meantime,
my first thought.
In the meantime, like what else can I do to preserve my situation? Make sure I have stuff on hand so that I can outlast the scenario that I'm faced with.
And that leads right into something else I wanted to talk about, because not a lot of people realize, okay, my neighborhood is out of power. Well, my grocery store is in my neighborhood. So if I'm out of power, the grocery store is going to be out of power. Well, who cares? There's stuff on the shelves. No, if I only have a way to pay for it that's electronic or electrical, the store's not going to just let me walk out with stuff on a credit, something or another. Like, I literally have to have a way to pay for that. And so one of the things I highly recommend, and I just realized I got to get more. I've kind of used it up a little bit and I got to go get some more, but having cash on hand in those power outages can be the really, I mean, if you're going to go to the grocery, let's say you have a lot of food storage, you got a lot of preps, but there's 1 or 2 things that you kind of just didn't really kind of forgot about or didn't get, or you realize, oh shoot, now that you're in the power outage, you realize, oh wait, I should have got more of that, because that's happened plenty of times. And so you realize what you should have get, and the next time you'll be better prepared, but this time you got to go to the store and get it. Well, if you don't have cash, that store's out of power, you're not going to be able to buy anything from the store. Number one. Number two, you might have a line out that store and you might have to be prepared to wait in line or hopefully not fight anybody. But there's a definite reality to, if the power's out especially now, no offense to California, but especially in California, so many people on EBT, like if those EBT cards go out,
Mhm.
you're going to have a fight. You're
Some
going to have a
chaos.
war at the store, so just be careful. I would say have enough food and stuff on hand that you could last 3 or 4 days. Let the stores kind of clear out. The first couple of days, they're going to get raided. And then after that, you can maybe go and see what they have left. But so much of our distribution system is just in time that if there's a run on the stores, those stores don't have anything left. They don't have anything in the back to
There's nothing in the
restock.
back. Yeah. It's all on
So
the shelves.
that's another thing to remember, is that when you have a power outage, your store is no longer a storage. The store is literally just in time. Probably they have they right there, whatever they have on the shelves, and maybe a couple things in the back is all that store actually has. There's no backups. So
They
it's
have
important
trucks
to remember
coming in
that.
every single night. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because it's like I just my brain just jumped into, and you can only DoorDash so much until that part of the grid's gone, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
I'll just DoorDash. For those of you who do that all the time, yeah, it's fun right now, but when the power's out and the local internet's gone, how are you going to DoorDash? Oh, well, I can use my phone. Okay, the next town over is getting overloaded, right? You got to think about this. That's why it's so good to always have a stockpile, a surplus at home, right?
And also keep in mind that if the outage is widespread enough, your local emergency services are also going to be compromised as well, and possibly overloaded. And we always talk about being the solution ourselves, not being part of the problem, and not being prepared during a power outage means you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
And you're just going to contribute to the chaos. But if you can not go to the store, you've got your gas tanks are full. You just have to hunker down for a while, and just stay at home with the kids and have fun. Right? That's again kind of going back to being a kid. Hey, this is going to be fun. We're going to have a good time here because we're prepared.
Yeah.
And we don't have to rely on anyone else and say, oh, hey, I forgot to go to the store and get milk. Okay, we're going to do without milk for a while. And we'll just crack open the powdered milk.
I think you bring up a good point, Shane, is that we'll just have fun with the kids. So if back in the day we had board games, today it's all on, you're on your phone on an app doing your whatever, game, or you're doing your Xbox game. So, just remember to have some things, maybe have some card games, some board games,
an actual chess board instead of playing it on your phone.
Yeah. Just have some fun games that you can play if the power is going to be longer than a couple hours or a day or two, that you can, have some fun things to do to pass the time. I think that's a good idea to throw in there too.
And you can head on over to the little Goodwill and all those other secondhand stores. Like, you can find tons of board games that way. Like, we've stockpiled half our board games from places like that. Shoots and Ladders, Sorry. Like, and my kids are little. I mean, 4 and 7, so they can play some of these games, other games that, like, I'll explain the rules and they're like off in La La Land. Dad, I'm going to do this. I'm like, well, you can't. Well, I'm going to do it anyways. Right. And it's so much fun, but in a power outage, it'll be not too disruptive because they've already played it, right? They're used to it, and you don't have to try to figure it out. Like, you don't have to figure out how to run my heater during the power outage because I've already done it before. I don't have to figure out how to play this game with my kids or how to light it because I've already practiced it before. I've already drilled this before. I've already done it before. So it's not new. Like, the absolute worst thing to do is to try to fix something for the first time or operate something for the first time that may be complex when there's no light.
And your kids will know what to expect, and they won't be scared because, hey, we've done this before. Hey, Dad, are you going to turn the generator on? Are you going to get the power bank out? Do we get to hang the lights up? And they can get involved and be excited about doing something different, setting a tent up, like in the winter when you to conserve some heat, set up a tent inside the house. That'll help conserve your heat as well, and sleeping in that tent. So yeah, I have really no concerns about a power outage. If it's extended, my backup plan would be to bug out to our bug out property, because we've got that set up, which will be a little bit more convenient to live without power there. But that's just part of our plans. But just good times. I think I look forward to being without the power being without the internet, being without all these distractions, and sitting down and playing board games. We love board games and puzzles. Love to sit down and do puzzles with the kids. It's
Oh yeah,
good time. Good times.
puzzles are great to have. Well, guys, this has been a fun episode. I think those of you who are listening, take some time to think of some of the different things we've talked about. Like, assess your situation, assess your plan, look at your local grid, talk to your local supply, power supply, and who are your utilities coming from? What are their plans? Find out what their plans are in these disasters, and then plan accordingly so that you may not even need them, right? It's always best to not need anybody. You can be completely free and ungovernable. And don't be fearful. Don't listen to what we've talked about and go, oh no, I'm not prepared, and panic and freak out. Put together a plan. Join our group at Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance. We have fun in there. It's on our Facebook. Go to preppertalkradio.com. Click on the link to our group there. Go to preppertalkradio.com. Click on our link to backup batteries. We've got a lot of different things and resources there. And if you're just unsure of what to do, you can always email us, preppertalkradio@gmail.com. We're here to help. We're here to help enlighten and help you prepare, help you eliminate the fear of unpreparedness, because there is absolute joy in being ready for almost everything. I can attest to it. Shane can.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And between now and our next episode, make some efforts to get better prepared and have fun doing it. Get creative and get your family involved. Get your friends involved. Get people involved who show interest. And those who don't, you're going to have to leave them out. That's their choice. And any final thoughts, you guys, before we let them go?
Well, I mean, this topic is still pretty big. We didn't really touch on a cyber attack, which I guess my parting words would be that this is a pretty big concern nationwide, that our grid is getting old, that the risk of cyber attack from, of course, our government says from China, right? And so I just keep that, I guess, on the front of your mind, and that, this could happen anytime. Don't delay, like you're saying, Scott. Just make a step today, tomorrow, next week, and just get yourself a little bit more prepared every single day, little by little. And like you say, it does feel good to not have to have any fear in your life about this particular topic in general.
And what's interesting, just my final thought too, is what's interesting is the power outage. Almost everybody will experience at least one power outage in their life, if not multiple power outages. So it's definitely something that you're going to have happen to you. So just get prepared for it. And the better prepared you are, the less damage or the less stress that it will cause when it comes, because it's going to happen. So
yep,
that's my final thought.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in and for not tuning out and being on the side of ready-minded living. This has been Prepper Talk Radio. We are the podcast for the prepared. We are radio for the ready-minded, and that is you, our listener. Thank you for being part of the family. Thank you for listening. Thank you for liking, sharing, and getting this out to as many people that we can help as possible. We'll catch you on the next episode.
See you next week.